Now, Ira, instead of worrying if Mike Norvell had left, how many of these portal kids are actually going to go to class here? Are they just going to turn around and go somewhere else? Now you can look by pairs here, and I'm going to pull up the list. It all started with Marvin Jones Jr., and we understand the legacy and the impact of what he can have at defensive end. But I'm just going to go up the list. And Ira, you're welcome to stop me at any point. It's almost like the Price is Right if you see somebody that you want to talk about. But this is going to scroll up for a while. This is
I do want to stop on DJ, and I'm not going to stop on everybody, I promise. But DJ is very significant to me in a way maybe that I didn't really even think about at the time. But the more I've talked about it and just done other interviews, and the more I've thought about it, and then you look at Florida State's schedule next season, and you guys may have talked about it too. I don't catch everything you guys say on Jeff's show, but I think they go from a team that I thought, man, with Tate a quarterback or whoever was a quarterback that anybody other than probably DJU, I thought, look, man, if you win 8 games, you go 8-4, you're probably in good shape. That's at least, and then you can make a run the next year. But when you get DJ, I think he's going to do really well. And then you bring in the pieces they're bringing around them. Now, man, I think 10-2 is like not the floor, but man, 10-2 is not just realistic. Like that's what you should be at least shooting for, with the possibility of going higher. And I just want to single him out because I think he changes the math just because it's an experienced, very good college quarterback.
Well, and it's exactly what you need too, Ira, in terms of a bridge. You've got some young players that you're very excited about, but the situation with Tate was the moment that they started dipping into the portal and bringing in Cam Ward and DJ for interviews, and that seemed like it was going to be untenable. And I do remember, it feels like it was a year ago, but it was about 3 weeks ago, Ira. It was basically the eve of the Orange Bowl, and it's all the opt-outs and how bad is Florida State going to get killed in this game, and what does that do to your reputation? I remember part of the chat one day on the JCS was, well, how many wins do you think we're capable of right here, right now? So before Marvin, before DJ, and we were discussing it, Ira, and I felt like 7 or 8, but it's fluid.
8 would have been optimistic. 8, things have gone pretty good if you got 8 at that point, right?
And it was just about, well, don't count them out just yet because they do what they do in the portal. Let's see what they add. But as it stands right now, you're losing so much talent, you don't have answers. And here are the answers now. Here's one of the Alabama kids, the first one, Earl Little, to commit to Florida State. Likely going to be a starter in the secondary. We'll see. He's going to battle it out. Jalen Brown from LSU. Grady Kelly, which helps fortify the defensive line. Once they get those announcements out there, Ira, about a couple of important defensive tackles and retention, I think everybody can really, really believe that Florida State's rotation is going to be there in a crazy and good place like it was last year. But as I'm scrolling through these names, Ira, I get excited for spring because a lot of these guys, if not all of them, are going to be on campus in spring and battling for jobs. Last year's spring camp was about a lot of guys who came back and one more run at a playoff, one more run at an ACC championship, and you knew who most of the starters were going to be. This year, any one of these guys could be starters. Who do you want me to highlight?
Our guy from Oregon State, the defensive end. I'm not going to say his name. I'm going to promise I'm going to work on these names. I don't have them yet. Aslan even texted us a pronunciation for a guy here, and I don't have it in front of me, but he was like second team all Pac-12.
Yeah.
Like he came in that flurry of players, and I think he kind of got mixed. Some of these guys, you may say, okay, well, they play college football, but they weren't a star or whatever. I think this is a guy who I think he's going to make a much bigger impact, I believe, than say Gilbert Edmond did. I think he's going to be an impact player on that defense.
Well, and you see the different ways that Florida State can configure their defensive ends now because, Ira, you got sturdy players like Duro Jaye from West Virginia, who is just underneath Lolo Hea. There we go.
Big dude.
I had to do these videos, so that's why I've got some practice with their names. But these are large players, exactly, in the Keir Thomas mold more than, say, the Patrick Payton mold. And so now that you can throw big bodies at the problem, not just quick twitch guys like a Patrick Payton or, to a degree, Marvin Jones Jr., the variety is there. I don't know, Ira, that they've got the top-end talent the way they did on the defensive line this past season when they went 13-0, but they can throw numbers at the problem, and they can rotate a ton of dudes to keep guys fresh. I think that's what this defensive end core is going to be about. But again, you're looking, and here's the home stretch with a couple Alabama kids and Terrence Ferguson and Roydell Williams, Richie Leonard from Florida, another giant interior offensive lineman, and it's capped off at the moment. Who knows? Maybe in 10 minutes, Florida State will be hosting another Alabama player. But with Sean Murphy at linebacker, Ira, I just get so excited for spring camp because the turnover on this roster is huge in terms of snaps and experience. There are going to be guys battling in just about every position group, 2 and 3 deep. And Florida State, I think what's happening right now, Ira, on the fly, is that they're building that kind of depth that maybe they didn't display in the Orange Bowl, but it looks like they're building reinforcements after reinforcements here.
Yeah, and I like the mix of you have some of those older guys, like you mentioned Grady, and you got some of these older guys that played a lot of college football at maybe a lower level, um, but have had a lot of success. And I think that follows the pattern of the Braden Fisks and the Keir Thomases and some of the guys that Keir Thomas played in the SEC, but guys that weren't necessarily stars or weren't necessarily 5 stars coming out of high school. They're guys that developed in college. They're older guys that can play. So you have a bunch of those guys in this group, but you also have a bunch of these really super highly talented young players that haven't proven it yet, but you're really excited about. Earl Little, Marvin Jones Jr., some of those guys that, were 4 or 5 stars coming out of high school and haven't played their best yet or haven't got the opportunities yet in college. So you kind of have this mix of Roydell Williams, I think, is the running back from Alabama, is a guy that's played a lot of football. But then you also have some of these younger guys that are super high talents, and I think that's it's a good mix, and it feels like maybe a next step in the evolution of how they use the portal.
Yeah, again, they're at I think it's 13 now, but well into the double digits. Go ahead.
It might be 14. It might be 14. I think it might be it's 14 now with Sean Murphy.
So 14 players now for Florida State, in addition to the high school haul. Like when you put them together, this is something that it's hard to do in the moment, especially on signing day. If maybe there's a decision that goes down to the wire, doesn't go Florida State's way, as happened this year on the 20th of December. But when you put those two groups of young men together, Ira, holy cow, like Florida State did serious work this offseason in terms of setting themselves up, like you're saying, with some players that are in there last year. Malik Benson's one of those.
Right.
But a bunch of younger guys. Jalen Brown is now walking in side by side with Elijah Moore and other receivers for Florida State this class, with the Charles Lester. Like, man, this roster it's going to look very different. We're going to have to grab those roster sheets, the numerical sheets, just to sort through all the guys in the spring. But it gets really fun, Ira, because now this year is about attacking a goal, and it doesn't seem far-fetched that Florida State can defend its ACC crown after all these additions that they've made.
Yeah, and I think if you look at some of the portal departures kind of in the last few weeks, or really the last month probably, I think you probably can see signs that they knew how well they were going to do in the portal, because, a couple of guys who were torn between going and staying. A couple of the older defensive linemen, Malcolm Ray and Dennis Briggs. I'm not saying they were pushed out, but maybe Florida State didn't push real hard to keep them. Malcolm Ray ends up going to Rutgers. Dennis Briggs is trying to get his 7th year. But those are two guys who, maybe if Florida State didn't feel good about what they're bringing in, maybe they push harder. You look at running back. Rodney Hill was a guy that a lot of people really liked and were sad when he left and thought that was a bad sign when he left. Well, I don't know if you watch this kid from Alabama who's a grown man. I don't know that you're going to think that Rodney Hill would have been better next year than he will be. So, again, I'm not saying they push guys out, but they may have not pushed to keep certain players because of what else they thought they might have coming.